Most divers think a 3-minute safety stop at 5 meters or 20 feet means they are automatically safe. But today, we are going to take a deeper look at this and understand some tools you can use to increase your safety more than the arbitrary 3-minute rule. I'm Don, an avid and passionate diver that has dove around the world, and in this video, I'll give you a simple way to understand gradient factors, how to read GF99 and SurGF, and one rule you can use on your very next dive. Let's dive in. Starting off with that a dive computer is not reading your body. It's not some kind of smartwatch that's constantly reading your heart rate, knowing how well you slept, or what you ate for lunch. The math is often a decompression model using tissue compartments with different half times. Each compartment has a maximum tolerated supersaturation called an M-value. Think of the M-value as the model's red line, where opening the carbonated soda can too fast becomes unsafe. When you start a dive, you'll see a countdown timer called NDL, or rather, no decompression time. That counts down how many minutes at your depth you have until you cross over that M-value line, which will be dangerous then if you immediately surface. Because of decompression sickness, which by the way, in this video, I'm gonna go really briefly on, just to understand the basics. But if you're curious about the details, check out this video here next. But back to that M-value. Over the red M-value line, the model says the risk is unacceptable and you must now run decompression procedures to properly surface without potential decompression risk, or rather DCS risk. In recreational diving, we always stay below the M-value, and that keeps our risk low. Tech divers can and do go above this, but they must plan for it and have the proper gear, gas, and training for it, because the risk is much higher when you go over the M-value. If you do go to the surface, which you now have, once you go over the M-value, you have a ceiling, which if you go above that ceiling, you're risking real decompression risk, very high risk. And it's important to note that when you technical dive, just because you're a technical diver, you don't just accidentally go into decompression. That is not a thing. You always plan for it. At the beginning of your dive, you should know I'm going to do decompression on this dive, and that's okay because I've calculated how much time I have, how much gas I have, and I know it's okay for me to do 5 minutes decompression on this dive. It's planned. It's not an accident. Because if you accidentally do it, maybe you don't have enough gas to satisfy the decompression obligation. And if you don't, and you go to the top, or you don't have enough buoyancy control to deal with something that happens on the dive, there is real risk to your health and possibly to your life. And that's generally why when we recreational dive, we stay under that line, where generally the risk is fairly safe for us to come up at any time, or rather safer, because there's also a lot of other variables. Well, again, M-value doesn't personalize it to you, who you are, and all the factors that may affect how close you are to that line, and particularly physiologically or even on that dive. But here's another twist. Your computer continuously estimates how close your leading compartments is to that red line M-value. What it doesn't predict are the other factors that could be making more at risk of DCS. Maybe you didn't sleep well, had a hard workout earlier that day, didn't drink enough water, hit hard current, or the water is cold. Two divers can have identical profiles and identical safety stops and still have different risks, such as athletic capability, age, body fat, and more. I won't be surprised if new research comes out 10 years after I make this video showing new things that could add decompression risk. But in general, the idea is to visualize yourself while diving like a soda can, that soda bottle. There's inert gas in your body and dissolved into your tissues, and that needs to be released safely before we surface, especially if we're saturated. And so the way to do that is to ascend within safe values, which is generally 10 meter or 33 feet maximum over a minute. and I'd even do 1/3 or half of that between 6 meters or 20 feet to the surface. The slower you go above 6 meters or 20 feet, the better. But you're that soda can and trying not to rile it up as much as possible. But things happen on diving. We can't predict everything. We can always have a plan. Plans are good. But sometimes the plans get thrown out the window as soon as someone's gear fails or someone sees a mola mola. So that is where gradient factors come in. And more dive computers are supporting this feature. Gradient factors let you choose how close you are to the model and approach that red decompression line at different points in the ascent, effectively adjusting for health differences between divers. They add conservatism on top of the base model, so you surface with a chosen buffer instead of flirting with that maximum. There are two configurable parameters for gradient factors in dive computers. Generally one of them, which is GF low, influences the model where it starts telling you to stop, or rather your lower decompression stops. If you do not intend to enter over the M-value redline, or rather go into decompression, then you can mostly ignore GF low for recreational diving. It's more of a tech diver thing, but it's important to know about. For GF high, this is definitely going to be the one that you want to customize to you, no matter what kind of diver you are. GF high decides how close you are allowed to be towards that M value as you go to the surface. The basic concept is a lower GF high finishes the dive with more cushion at the surface, or rather conservatism and safety. It is tempting to trust the default settings because they work for many divers in many places. But defaults are based on averages, not you. They are not tuned to your workload, your fitness, how old you are, or maybe how many holiday pounds you put on, or to your cold tolerance, or your gas plan. If you want your own margin, you need to understand what your numbers mean and how they affect the shape of the ascent. Think of your tissues like that carbonated soda bottle that I mentioned earlier that has been shaken at depth. The number on your computer does not change when you're cold or tired, but how you open the can, or rather surface, should change because you know better. You've known you've been a little bit shaken on your dive and prefer not to be opened fast because you know there are real consequences. M values are the hard limit where popping the cap all at once risks a foam volcano. Gradient factors are the way you decide how slowly to crack the cap and how calm you want the bottle to be before you fully open it at the surface. The algorithm will not automatically decrease the NDL for cold, fatigue, or workload. You have to make that judgment. You have to set the cushion you want, and you have to dive your ascent deliberately. I do want to really pound home one thing. Gradient factors are not just for tech divers. They're something that we can use in all dives to make the judgment of how much risk we want on that dive. In reality, conservatism is a dial that you set for any dive where you want more margin. You can dive warm, shallow, and easy and still choose to surface with a larger safety buffer, but that is your choice. The key is being intentional and consistent so you know what your numbers mean and why you chose them. Your dive computer might show a clean countdown and a nice green bar, but it's important to know that a model is still a model. There is individual variability in perfusion, microbubble dynamics, and susceptibility that no dive computer measures. Treat the model as a guidepost, not a promise. Use it, respect it, and layer it in reasonable conservatism for the day you are actually having. Okay, I've introduced several concepts here, but I want to drive some of them home with more visualization, going back to that carbonated bottle. At depth, the gas is quiet because it is squeezed into solution, which is your blood, like a sealed bottle that looks calm even after it's been jostled a little bit. However, if you rip the bottle cap open all at once at the surface, you get a foam volcano, which is like crossing over the M-value line too aggressively. Cracking the cap slowly and pausing lets the fizz settle, which is like staged ascents and safety stops. GF low is when you start cracking the lid and letting a little gas out sooner rather than waiting until the very end. A lower GF low means the model starts asking for stops sooner and deeper, which is like beginning to open the bottle cap just a tiny bit, a little bit earlier or deeper. GF high is how calm you want the bottle to be before you open it all the way at the surface. A lower GF high means you wait until the fizz is quieter before you finish the dive, giving you a wider margin. A higher GF high means you accept opening the bottle when there is still more fizz activity near the top. Shearwater dive computers ship with helpful presets that map to common choices, which I'll use here. But it's important to note that I'm not just advocating for Shearwater dive computers here. It's just because I know them. But I do know a lot of other dive computers understand the benefits of gradient factors and are introducing something similar. But they might be named something slightly different or presented in a slightly different way. So I'm trying to give this information in a way it's not Shearwater only, but rather you can use it for your own dive computer, maybe with some slight difference of details. But in general, Shearwater ships with low conservatism, or rather high risk, at GF low of 45 and GF high of 95. Medium conservatism is 40 and 85 and is the default for many units. So if you haven't changed it, then it's probably that. High conservatism is 35 and 75. I personally run with super conservative numbers of 35 and 70. I might adjust it depending on who I dive with. And your next question might be, why not just go even more conservative? Why not just dive super conservative? Well, you can, but it's going to make you enter decompression sooner. Your NDL countdown will be sooner, so you will have to plan around decompression, making it a tech dive, and you should have a plan in those cases. Or you just don't dive deep for very long. You can make your choices, but generally I err on the safer side because I do tech diving. When I tech dive, I have more than enough gas for the things I'm doing, and it's more about just trying to surface as safe as we can at the end of the dive. And these are the numbers I've adopted from my peers. But for recreational diving, 40 and 45 does just fine. I won't say it's unsafe. But again, what's nice is now that you know these values, you can customize them to yourself. Maybe when I'm 60, I might choose to be even more conservative. Or if I gain some holiday pounds, I can be more conservative. Or I haven't exercised in a long time and I'm getting a little out of shape. I can make these decisions to adopt more conservatism and make my diving safer. Some other dive computers might just have a plus or minus modifiers to conservatism to make it more conservative or more aggressive. Essentially, this is the same thing without exposing the numbers to you directly. You might wonder whether copying your buddy's settings is good enough. It can be a useful starting point, but it ignores that personalization factor. For example, some divers who get cold easily, a little bit older, has those holiday pounds, has been working hard in current, or needs to fly soon right after the diving. All those reasons, you might prefer a very conservative buffer. And by the way, when I say soon, I'm still talking about a reasonable now, not like an hour after diving. That'd be insane. You don't need to obsess over these gradient factor numbers though. I would try and pick one that seems reasonable for you, dive with it, and you can always adjust it at any time. After this video, now that you know about it, you can play with it and choose how conservative you'd like to be. You just need to choose your baseline knowingly, as we'll go over how you can modify your limits on a dive based on the conditions that you experience during that dive. These really are maximum limits you want to give yourself. And here is a practical way to pick a baseline. If you like the default behavior and you dive relaxed profiles with plenty of gas, keep to medium at 40 to over 85. If you want a wider surface cushion on ordinary dives, choose a high conservatism at 35 over 75. If you're like a superhuman in immaculate shape, in great condition, and you just have a cardiovascular system of a machine, then maybe you can be less conservative and go for the least conservatism option. But again, the choice is yours. You're choosing your level of risk. If you regularly push close to those no decompression limits and you look on your dive computer and it says like 1, maybe less than 5 minutes of NDO. And if that's happening often, or you mix in short decompression dives with planned gas, then you might want to tune it deliberately. Test within your training. Whatever you pick, keep it consistent over a handful of dives so you can learn how literally your numbers make you feel after a dive and how your computer behaves. Now connect the analogy to the behavior in the water. Opening that fizzy soda bottle slowly does not happen by itself. You still control the angle, the pauses, and the final opening of that bottle. And mind you, that bottle is your body, and so treat it with care. Gradient factors do not remove the need to ascend smoothly. Hold a steady stop and avoid those yo-yo motions. They just keep you under the line you choose with a calmer soda bottle by the time you surface. Real control comes from reading live feedback and making small, deliberate adjustments. And that is where GF99 and SurGF become your dashboard gauges on your dive computer. And by the way, if you're enjoying this video, now's a great time to like and subscribe and help others discover this video and my channel, where I post weekly content to help divers grow their skills, build confidence, and explore the ocean with curiosity and care. And by the way, if you're interested in the latest and greatest in the scuba diving industry, I have a monthly newsletter for free that you can sign up for in the description below. Now let's break into how on a dive you can always adjust dynamically depending on how you feel and the conditions you're experiencing. This is the real game changer, and it was super enlightening for me when I started learning about this, and I hope it is for you as well. Starting with the important values that you can display on your dive computer that support it. GF99 and SurGF are both represented as percentages of how close you are to the M value. First, let's talk about the GF99 value. It is effectively the gradient factor of how much nitrogen is being off-gassed at any point. When it's 0, you're not off-gassing at all. You're basically being more saturated with nitrogen. When it's anything more than 0, you're off-gassing. So really, it's still a model, so it's important to realize all these are just models. They're not personalized to you, but it does show you in real time how efficient your off-gassing is, which is pretty cool. Going back to that example I gave earlier, imagine you're opening that soda can, that cap, and you're seeing how much it's fizzing and saying, okay, it's fizzing a little bit, so I'm going to slow down my cap opening. And instead of allowing it to rupture into a volcano, I'm just going to slow down the cap, or I'm going to just let it sit for a little while. I'm going to just, okay, it's cool, just some bubbles, cool, let it sit. And then I'm going to continue opening the cap. This GF99 value is going to let you make that judgment based on the model. Effectively, it lets you know how well you are off-gassing at the current depth, where 0 to 45% is generally fairly safe. Over 45% to your GF high value. Or rather, if my GF high value is 85%, that'd be 45 to 85% is getting risky bubbles. And anything higher than your GF high value, which in this case, the example I gave is 85%, is high DCS risk. So what's cool is when I go to my safety stop, I can see, okay, I have my GF99 is showing 3%. That's not very good. In fact, it's very slow. If I did my full 3 minutes at 3%, maybe my decompression goes down. My SurGF, which we'll get to in a minute, goes down a touch, but not very good. So I might make a decision that I'm sitting at 20 feet or 6 meters. And you know what? I can go up to 10 feet, or rather 3 meters. And now it's like at 24 or 30%. That's much better off-gassing. And now if I just do my full 3 minutes there, I'm getting rid of so much extra nitrogen for the time I'm spending. So you're making your off-gassing much more efficient. And you have that intelligent choice to make of how efficient you're off gassing. So this is great because now you're just having the hood opened to the algorithm, and now you can make intelligent choices off of it. And where I'm at is super inefficient, so I'm gonna ascend a little bit. Let's ascend a little bit and improve our off-gassing rate. So now when you're doing your next safety stop, you can look at that and optimize how well you're off-gassing. But remember, keep it below generally 45%. You've ascended too high if it's getting close to 45%, and try not to exceed it. Likewise, you can see that if you're ascending too fast, you'll see that number getting higher and higher, which also means slow down. So it also is kind of like a speed indicator of how fast you should be ascending as well. So next, we'll talk about SurfGF, which is a projection of what your gradient factor would be if you surface instantly, and as long as it stays below your GF high value, it's generally pretty safe. SurfGF is like asking how much bubbles or even eruption you'd like to have at the surface if you pop the cap fully right at the second. Or rather, going back and visualizing a little bit more, it's how much inert gas is in your soda bottle, and if you were to just pop that top as quickly as possible, how much fizz you would have at any given time. So if you're under your GF high value, this is the value that how much risk that you would like to have. Theoretically, if you're under it, then you won't get an explosion. Like if I were to just ignore the safety stop and go straight to the top, it would just be maybe a little bit of bubbles, but it'd be okay. As long as I'm not ascending so fast that my GF99 is going above and causing big bubbles to form. So that's why when we recreational dive, as long as we stay below our GF high value, a safety stop is really not required. It's only recommended. Staying below our GF high value keeps it a safe and recreational dive without need for decompression procedures. At the end of your dive, we generally almost always do a safety stop, but often these are often more inefficient than you'd imagine because of that GF99 I mentioned. All right, let's picture this scenario. Early in an ascent, SurfGF is usually high because your tissues are still full, like a bottle that is still loaded with all those nitrogen inert gas bubbles. So we need to ascend to allow that saturated tissue to start releasing that gas and allowing our body to expel it slowly. As we ascend, we'll see our GF99 increase, which shows us that we are off-gassing some of that inert gas as we ascend. And as that GF99 is off-gassing, we'll see our SurfGF start going down as a percentage. So if I'm sitting at 70% and then my GF99 goes to 20%, after some time, it might go down to like 50% SurfGF, and my GF99 is then becoming inefficient for my depth. So it might be down to like 1 or something like that. These are just made up numbers, but I'm just trying to give you the visual of how the number relationship works. So to get my GF99 higher, again off-gassing efficiently, I would have to ascend again to get the SurfGF even lower. But going back to that example, if I'm at 50%, and my GF high is 85%, way below GF high value. So generally, I could probably ascend and end a dive at any point reasonably safe. 50% is a very safe value to end a dive at. Generally, anything below 70% is considered very safe, but it also depends on your dive. If you had a very stressful incident, you were fighting current, or something happened on that dive to make you feel uncomfortable, maybe it's good to go down to 60 or 50%. But that is your decision to make. And SurfGF and GF99 gives you the tools to intelligently make that decision. That's pretty cool. These numbers effectively mean you can visibly see how much you're decompressing at your safety stop. Like I mentioned, if your GF99 is low, like 0 to 10%, you are not decompressing at all or inefficiently. You can speed up and maximize your safety stop by trying to ascend higher. Given conditions allow it, it might be very hard to do in surge. So if you have surge, maybe just spend a little bit longer time off-gassing inefficiently and then try to off-gas more efficiently, but maybe the surge is too much and it pops you to the top. But you've already tried to get rid of as much decompression obligation as you could, so it's not that big of a deal. But again, you're going back, now I have these tools and I can use these tools to intelligently make decisions based on the conditions I'm diving. But generally, you want to try and get your GF99 to 20 to 42%. That's kind of like the sweet spot. The ideal sweet spot range for decompressing. And you can shave off a good 10 to 20% of your SurGF by doing this, which is much better use of your safety stop. You can judge when to surface based on how you feel and how the dive went. But again, I do want to warn to keep your GF99 below 42% because a higher value means larger numbers promote faster nitrogen release, which causes bigger and deadlier bubbles in your body. Make any depth changes in small, controlled increments and avoid that yo-yo behavior. And if GF99 sits far below that zone and refuses to rise, you may be deeper than necessary for efficient off-gassing, which happens a lot on safety stops. You will be surprised once you start looking at these numbers. You'll probably be thinking about all those safety stops you did and probably kind of wasted 3 minutes of your dive because they were so inefficient. Small swings near the surface can change the gradient quickly because the pressure change per meter or foot is large in the last 5 meters or 20 feet. And just from my own personal story, when I started experimenting with GF99 and seeing how inefficient off-gassing was, on a recreational dive, I was very surprised to find that most of the time, I was not efficiently off-gassing until I got to 3 meters or 10 feet. And so that generally is a nice zone to do your safety stop, but it also depends if there's surge or current at the surface. You might choose to generally do a little bit safer and deeper safety stop at 6 meters or 20 feet. In general, most tech divers will do their safety stop at 6 meters and 20 feet because the surge exchange is a little more relaxed there. Of course, you're exchanging efficient off-gassing for a little bit more relaxed safety stop, but the choice is yours. These are tools in your tool chest. And of course, it depends where you are at in your own diving journey, because holding a safety stop at 3 meters or 10 feet is a little bit harder than 6 meters and 20 feet. So you have to have the buoyancy control to lock it in for 3 minutes as well. All right, one more example to drive this home because I really think this is going to be super helpful for you if you can visualize it. If I do a dive with a GF high value of 85% and basically straddled my no deco limit, I can expect to have a surf GF of 85. So basically I'm coming up around 85%. I might make a decision that I ran extra cold that dive. You know, I'm freezing at the end of the dive. I'm not feeling good as well. I decide to crack the cap a bit with a longer safety stop and target about 40% GF99 at around 3 meters or 10 feet. There's no surge, it's fairly calm. I make the decision that I want to off-gas very efficiently for extra safety. I do my safety stop, and at the 3 minutes, I look at my GF99 and see it's still maybe like 72%. And you know what? Since I was a little cold and not feeling well on this dive, you know, I really want to surface at 60%. So I'm gonna do a couple extra minutes at my safety stop and make it a 5-minute safety stop to come up at 60%. You see, maybe my dive buddy goes up, they can still see me from the surface, that's fine. Maybe they stay with me during my decompression stop, but I'm making the decision that, you know, I'm not feeling great, I want to feel better, and I really don't want to deal with decompression sickness, even though, you know, honestly, 72% is probably fine. I just want to be extra safe, and that's okay. I want to be extra safe because this dive wasn't perfect. It wasn't great. And so 60%, 2 more minutes, I can see I'm below 60%, which is where I wanted to be, and then I surface. I've used these tools to effectively, based on the conditions of the dive, how I felt, added extra safety buffer to my dive. Another example, let's say in the same case, I came up with 85% and there's high swells at the surface. So I don't think I could efficiently off-gas at 3 meters or 10 feet. In fact, maybe it feels unsafe at 6 meters and 20 feet. So maybe I decide to stay a little bit lower at, let's say, 8 meters or 26 feet. I made that decision, and so I'm not off-gassing very efficiently at all there, but because of the swells, I'd rather get below 85% down to, let's say, 75%. So I can just sit at that depth, watch my GF99, and I can see the number going down. It's not efficient, so maybe I need to stay like 6 or 8 minutes there. But at any point in time, now I'm under 60%. That was my threshold that I felt I can surface with. And so, yeah, now I'm gonna go try to ascend up to like 6 meters or 20 feet. But because of those swells, maybe it shoots me to the top. Maybe I just uncontrollably goes to the top. But I made that judgment. I didn't want to be up there, earlier. So I'm gonna get rid of my decompression risk a little bit lower. And so I've now mitigated most of the risk before I got to the danger zone. And even if the uncontrollable does happen and it does pop me to the top, I've already played it as safe as I could. And as long, the next thing is I have to continue to breathe. If you're ascending fast, the next thing is lung over expansion, so you have to breathe in and out, don't hold your breath. But that's something we all train for. But I've also gotten rid of the risk of decompression sickness as well, as much as I can. And that's the beauty of gradient factors. Once you start reading it and understanding it, you'll be taking back the control and being able to fine-tune your safety margins based on literally how you're feeling on any dive. You will feel calm because you can see the safety margin grow. I hope this video has encouraged you to own your margin instead of trusting the countdown. If your computer supports it, be sure to turn on gradient factors for your next dive and make sure you can see the GF99 and SurGF values as you dive. If you enjoyed this topic, make sure you fully understand DCS2. I have just a video for you to watch next, here. The more you know, the more you'll love and protect the ocean. Until next time.